Well, hello there, everybody. How are y'all doing? Thank you for dropping in, turning on, and tuning in. We appreciate it. This is Thor's Day, so yeah, all hail Thor. Well, there you go.
Ah,
I don't know what else to say. I mean, you want to walk gently, in amongst these deities. But hey, no matter what, we thank you that you're here. Let me just speak favor over everybody, as I always like to do. Plant the seed so that when you have the need, you always have the seed. So that's just the way we roll. And as we like to sum up, nothing missing, nothing broken. For if there is perfect peace, it would be summed up as that. So, welcome everybody. This has become happening on Thursday. I am joined with Mike and Cindy from Evolutionary Energy Arts, which I'm always excited. So, welcome y'all. How are y'all doing?
hi.
Doing good,
We're
doing good.
good. We're adjusting to the weather and yeah, that's what we're doing. We're adjusting.
I find myself doing that a lot.
Yeah.
And the weather is like, you know, it's a really a big deal. I mean, um, everyone knows what happened here up in St. Louis last Friday, but this has been a tumultuous spring for us. It's just been, I think they said normally in a spring season, I think 16 tornadoes, and as of yesterday, we've had something like 120 plus tornadoes.
Mhm.
Um, loss of life last week. It hit in an urban area, which, it seems like these tornadoes are targeting more and more
Mhm.
urban areas.
Yeah, that's part of what we've gotten, is that it's part of the plan to hurdle people eventually and corral them up into the cities,
The smart cities.
Yes, yes,
Hmm.
exactly.
Yeah, with a promise of safety. You'll be safe here and you'll have air conditioning and you'll have food and you'll have all the things. And it
Yeah,
doesn't seem like, to me, it's not a very nice thing to do.
no, they're gonna try to make it like, a no-brainer, with UBI and everything for you.
They
Well,
want to make it sound like a country club, but that
mhm.
sounds like a prison to me. I don't know about you. It's like, come on in, don't worry about a thing. And I'm going, okay, what's up? I mean, maybe call me Shirley, call me suspicious, but yeah.
It's true, and it's the big awakening. So, I think you will have a lot of people that will ignore that, just because they want to ignore it and they don't want to really have their life too changed. And so, just that old la la la, I can't hear you.
It works, hear, see, speak, right?
Yep.
Yeah. And and you're right. It's interesting. I was at the store yesterday checking out and knew the lady that was at the register. And, everyone's talking about the weather and everyone's fatigued, we're
Hmm.
just, people are
Yeah.
tired of it.
Hmm.
And I said, you know what the real problem is with the weather? And she said, what, global warming? I said, no. I said, I wish that's what it was. I said, that you can kind of, well, all right, if it's global warming, then, but I said, the problem is, I said, it's the magnetic poles. She looked at me and she said, what does that have to do with weather? And within, a 30-second elevator little speech I gave her, she realized, and as the rest of people behind me, is that I said, well, the planet is, it's not like it used to be. The magnetic poles are moving, weather systems are moving, and then I said it's affecting all of us.
Hmm.
She
You
gave me a high five.
know,
Cool.
I mean, psychically too, our minds are changing. The way we communicate is changing, and I really think that the tablets, the computers, even though we can use them as tools, they can definitely stunt our spiritual growth in a really big way if we allow it. There's this lulling to sleep with the AI, and I was talking to a dear friend the other day, and he was mentioning a bunch of very important words, words like integrity, that are being taken out of our vocabulary through the AI, through chat, uh, and through the other AI systems. And these very important words that really structure us and help us define our world, and that are good for explaining things, are just being taken away. And they're in their place, they're putting in different words that are not assisting us in growing it, and they're kind of the opposite of that. So someday I want to talk about all these words that they're taking out, just so we can put them out there some more. I don't know, as a rebel.
Well, that's interesting, Cindy, because what I hear you saying, you see, that sounds to me like an agenda,
Yeah.
a systematic control system.
Yes. Yes.
Now, I'm just a simple guy, but it tells me that if someone's purposely doing it, and it is, they're rewriting history as we talk.
Mm-hmm.
I've been on this planet for 25,152 days. And, they don't want us around because, people that have been on the planet for, well, let's say between 20 and 25,000 days, we still remember.
Yeah.
And that's the threat. That's the big problem.
One of the things that keeps coming up in my mind, and I keep saying to Cindy, like, I don't think that the population of the world is getting much bigger. When I go back to my childhood, and of course I've lived in a lot of different places, but did it seem like I don't think we've really gained people, especially like in the last maybe 10 years or so. And what if this is the natural, unnatural ebb and flow? What if this is exactly what the system does? Is it does these resets on a regular basis, and whether the memory wipe, like we've even had these discussions. You were talking about the polls. Well, there's the thought that we could end up losing our memory during a pole reversal. It could actually affect our consciousness, and we all be walking around like, who are you? You look familiar. I mean, literally. What if that is part of it? What if the pole reversal is actually something that could be technologically done at even a faster interval? And, the memory wipe would be a natural part of it.
And it seems like they do it quite often.
Yeah. We've touched on those World's Fairs. And I just, when Trump said, we're going to have the World's Fairs again, oh man, did that just like alarm bells everywhere.
I'm on the record. Yeah, I have nothing against Trump. Just got to tell you, I don't have an agenda, but I don't think he's human. I mean, he's human, but yeah, I swear in my spirit, I can't see it, but I can see it that these are not human beings. They're not us. And the question is, well, who are we? And it seems like again, every time we get close as a collective consciousness, as a species, to maybe really figuring out what really has and is happening, it's like you said, Mike, they reset the whole playing field.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Well,
it's
when you look back through time, you see a lot of things that are really weird. Like we were talking about the World's Fairs with babies
yeah.
in incubators on display, and the way they handle babies, as if
dolls.
I mean, yeah, like throwing them about. It's like, that's a person. Are you
There's my
kidding?
baby.
If that was our kid, I mean, it's like you would deck the person for handling a baby like that. It's weird. It's really, really weird. And the whole thing with the stork bringing babies, and then the mailman bringing babies. But then when you look back in time, it almost seems like you could have mail ordered a baby, so to speak. And the orphan trains, where did all these kids come from? When you look at history, especially like if you study Russia and China from, say, 1800 to the end of World War II, I mean, both of those areas, the people went through constant warfare and constant depopulation. And, I think when we look to the Civil War here, There's more going on there than meets the eye too. And is it really part of a greater war? Because you look at the different wars. I mean, I did videos before that showed, you will hear of wars and rumors of wars, right? But the end is not yet. But yet, if you just go through, you'll find there are no years that don't have wars going on the planet in the last 6,000. It's been nonstop warfare. So it's
Well,
nonstop.
Yahweh is a God of war.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
I
Yeah.
mean, and that's what I'm equating it to. So St. Louis is just to the east of where I live, and it's interesting because when you're talking about these world expositions, these world fairs,
Yeah.
um, I don't think people really grasp the magnitude of these events. We have a thing it's right near it's fact, it's right across from the Natural Museum. It's where the old Ferris wheel from the World's Fair in St. Louis is buried. And it's a freaking, you could say it's a good size hill.
Mm-hmm.
And when I read that they had, I think in St. Louis, it was the depiction of, I think it was ancient Rome, and
Mm-hmm.
everything was accessible by water. Come on, something ain't right. And then, I'm drawn to the buildings, the mud flood.
Mm-hmm.
Architecture is kind of a witness within itself. And coming from construction, I don't know any architect who says, "Hey, I'll tell you what, Mike, what we got to do is make sure that the bottom floor is like halfway down in the ground. We want to make sure that the windows are like really up here on top where you can't see." Yeah, sure,
Yeah.
that makes sense. Oh, yeah, I'll
Yeah.
take one of those. But it's obviously happened. I mean, I had the Smithsonian Institution as a client for a number of years, and the artifacts that I saw in the warehouses, I was I was more motivated by profit back then, and if I had had just a little bit more clarity, I could have really soaked up more. But yeah,
Mhm.
Well, you see that, and you see a lot of these big fires like the Chicago fire. When
yeah,
look at, then you get to key years, 1871. And it wasn't just the Chicago fire. There's been similar fires all over the world. It really does appear to be part of a reset. And then, that is fascinating too, because there's depictions of a UFO shooting down a beam of light during the Chicago fire. And, when you look back through time, you'll find a lot of sightings of UFOs, UAPs, whatever we want to call them, at key junction points in history. We were talking about that before, with looking at the history of Alexander the Great. There was again sightings of ships, up in the sky over the battlefield of Alexander the Great. And what are they doing? Are they coaching him? Are they watching him? Are they making sure he's carrying out orders? When you touched on Yahweh, Lord of hosts, what is host? It's armies.
it's an army.
Yeah,
That's
that's the
exactly
thing
what
that,
it is.
but how many people, if we went and took, a survey in any church, would understand that, I wonder.
Oh, I doubt if many of them would. And what about the 1564 Nuremberg painting?
Yeah.
Mhm.
I've yet to have anyone adequately explain that to me.
Mm-hmm. And when you look closely, what do you see? You see orbs, like we have seen tons of orbs. You see other ships, classic saucers, and there appears to be like something that looks like Darth Vader or, Kylo Ren's ship, big, huge triangular thing up there in the sky, too. It is a depiction in 1564,
I
65
think, yeah, it's right in that area.
of what they saw, go back 3,000, 5,000 BC. This is what's described in the Hindu books too. So,
Yes.
I mean, these ongoing wars of the gods, they're extraterrestrial wars. They're also maybe, the better term is ultra terrestrial, to include beings that are living under the oceans, living in the side of the earth, living maybe on other densities that are just a little bit outside of our visibility range, as well as others that would look completely solid to us. from
I
other
have to
places.
bring Bill Shatner into the conversation. What does God need with a starship? You know,
Yeah.
I
Right.
mean, so if and listen, I think those are what our species is always described as gods, but it tells me something happened. I mean, you look at the religious paintings of that same era, and every so-called holy painting that you see, whether it's the Jesus, whether whoever it is, there's always a UFO in there.
Mhm.
Virtually every one of them.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Okay. So how could the gospel so radically change in less than 1,000 years? Because it's apparently they believed something different than what we have been taught to believe.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And again, I think, it's that what we call the dark matrix, in than the natural matrix. So like when you have Yeshua, talking about my father, he's referencing maybe the real creator of the natural matrix, where everybody else that we've had in there as, gods, Elohim, Yahweh, etc. These are all just different, different beings from us. Extraterrestrial, perhaps some are inner Earth beings. It's interesting that the Ramayana is perhaps the second biggest, greatest epic in the Hindu traditions. Rama's thought to be the ideal king, but where does he come from and go to? Inner Earth. He's actually a being from inside the Earth, the inner Earth civilizations, like Agartha. We've heard of Agartha, Shangri-La, Shambhala. He is one of them that is coming to the surface to help guide the humans on how we should do things. And he's still very imperfect. I mean, he screws up all the time, but he always tried to do the right thing. He always, kept in mind doing the right thing for the greater good of all the people. So he's thought to be like this, about as good a king as we could get possibly. And that is in pre Kali Yuga time, but it was in the end of the Bronze Age when we're heading into the Kali Yuga. So there is more and more evil taking hold, more service to self as opposed to service to others. And then we go into the Kali Yuga in its entirety. That's really where the rise of the Abrahamic traditions as we know it becomes dominant.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. I was just going through some of the Old Testament on, you know, those. So it's still in the backdrop of all this, with all these stories, and I'm still convinced they all came from one. I mean, I think there's just variations of a theme.
Yeah. I keep getting when I talk about the controllers. So we have like this other level who controls the controllers. So we have these human faces that we look at and they're on TV every day and they appear to be in control. Uh, there was a channeling I did a while back and the information that came through, they did call themselves the Anunnaki, but I have a problem with that because that is so widespread that,
Yeah.
those that came from heaven, but they did specifically say we are Anunnaki. And how can you really pick that apart and decide that that's one different being? I have a feeling that there are several very powerful entities and they're up and above and they're they're having a control that we don't quite understand, like a technological control, and it's getting tighter. And once they are ready and things are ripe. The word I really don't like is the word harvest. They talk about
Yeah.
the harvest, and that's to imply that, they're preparing people and getting them ready. And when they can, they're going to scoop them up and do something with them. And
Just because it stuck out in my head so much, like when Cindy was saying that they talked about themselves as being the Anunnaki. The first thing that they said, we are your gods of your Old Testament. We are your gods in the plural of your Old Testament. That was the very first part, and then the mythologies, like they are the Olympian gods are a representation of them for the most part. But yeah, I thought it was so telling. We are your gods in the plural of the Old Testament, which again, we know the Old Testament has been revised. The Masoretic texts, the Masoretes are, what's their job? They're constantly revising.
Yeah.
And they're covering up. This is what those priest scribes do. They revise and constant. So it's the system checking itself to make sure that we can't figure out what's really going on is what they're doing. But the other part that comes across is that when we look to the book of Job, you have God and Satan, with humans as playthings and things that they wager on. Well,
Well, Satan is actually called one of the sons of God.
yeah,
Yeah. And by the way, I think with the book of Job, it's also it's probably one of the more authentic books that we can actually look at, which is actually the oldest book of the Old Testament.
right. Yeah, it's kind of like off by itself in some ways. And I think it gives us a little taste of, well, it's really not too unlike a lot of the Greek myths, where humans are actually the playthings of the gods, and the gods do wager on us. And what will their reaction be? Well, let's see. What if we did this to them? Then what are they going to do next?
Oh, and last time they did this. Let's see what they do this time.
Yeah.
Like that.
The Egyptians are pretty good at that. I mean, the whole after death thing is really kind of, what is your heart has to be weighed as light as a feather? That's a wager, All right, I'll bet you $50 he don't make it, It's like, and it all comes back to this thing that if that's the case, then there's this seal that I often get within my mind's eye that we're trying to break that glass ceiling literally.
Right.
Mhm.
They changed the rules on us.
Mhm.
I'm looking at one of your moderators there, that Bonnie is saying, again, the best slave is one that doesn't realize they're a slave. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And we've all been duped. Absolutely. And I think part of the duping is getting us to think it's just God and Satan. There's only two different groups at play here. I think the reality is there's many groups in play. And that's part of our as above, so below. So we look to the politics of the world, and it's a mess. And I think that's the same thing. If we were to look out a little bit from the earth, we would see that there's a lot of different things going on with a lot of different groups of beings with their own self-interests at the forefront. And so, I think, again, where we are at this point in time is a big realization. We've never been alone. And yeah, there's.
But why us, Mike? Why humans? I mean, the universe is vast. If you believe what they say, there's trillions of Earth-like planets out there. So why are they here? I mean, are we that unique?
I think we're a good energy source, a very, very powerful energy
emotion,
source.
the emotion is the emotion that we carry.
But is that a rarity within the universe as a whole?
That's
Yes.
what I've picked up. It is very rare. The emotion that we carry is it's very controllable for one, and if we're not aware of that, then we can allow our emotions to be just a food source for several different beings. So our emotional levels, the way they go up and down, we're just batteries, and unless you're walking in awareness, you are going to be just a battery. And
well, the other part is too, this is a interesting situation, like we've shared. Our understanding is that Earth is made from the largest remnant of Tiamat. And, you see Tiamat in the Sumerian stories, at war with Marduk. And in many ways, yeah, that's the Anunnaki and their conquest of this world, our section of this world, which, is a small section of this world. I think that's part of the realization too. I think we will have some confirmation, not necessarily that we'll be able to freely move about to the other parts of the world. And maybe this has something to do with all the plane crashes and everything. There was another plane crash today. In
Oh,
San
14
Diego.
houses.
Yeah, it set 15
Oh, yeah.
houses on fire. A Cessna went down.
Mhm.
One of the things Cindy saw was that we're going to be grounded. And you only have,
Literally?
literally, yeah, no
Literally.
humans are going to be allowed to travel in planes for a period of time. And maybe it has to do with the realization that the Earth is actually bigger. So our flat Earth friends, they give us the dimensions and say, hey, the curvature is not what it should be. Well, they're right in that sense. It's not, because the planet is much bigger, and most of the planet is not under our control, and even our section is really not under our control.
Yeah. Have a tornado go by, you find out just how much control you got.
Yeah.
Which is remarkable. And it's so this tells me in another way that no God has ever manifested before humanity. And I was asking myself, I was outside meditating, talking to my dragon, and I was reflecting, have I ever seen a full-bodied apparition of a spirit manifest? And I had to say no, with one exception. Back in 1978 at Grace Christian Center, there was over a dozen people who saw this angel, this being that was up on the podium with Ron Tucker. But that's the other thing. There's been no evidence that if you look at this thing just straight on and be honest with yourself, there's no evidence of any of these gods existing. They're stories.
Right.
Everything I've studied in my life has been written by another human being. We were
Mhm.
talking about it before we went live. We have no way to validate what is being said here. And as you pointed out, Mike, the purpose is to regurgitate everything,
Mhm.
respin it, re-put it out. And at some point, you begin to, it's almost impossible to track down and to say it actually is true.
Right.
I go by what's actually happening, and if you look at the world, I think they're in a perfect position where they can hide and be there and say, "Ha, it's like gaslighting." It's very much like gaslighting to me. But if you look at the state of the world and you see what the human controllers are doing, it makes absolutely no sense unless you add in the factor that what's controlling them is non-human and not an entity that we can see in the 3D.
I
Yeah.
actually wrote that in the question, so that, and Cindy, that is just a huge point. And maybe we can expound on this because that's the whole thing. Is God human or is it not? Why does humanity worship that which is either itself or something that it's not?
I think it's natural for us to want to believe that there's a human looking being. It must soothe us, in a subconscious way for us to believe. And when you do go out of your body, it's been my experience and other people's experiences, they see who they need to see. They see absolutely who they need. Maybe it's Buddha, maybe it's Jesus. In my case, it was, I guess, the sun, but the sun was also breathing, and I didn't need to ask, are you source at all? I just knew it was source. And I think these other people that leave the body, they see who they need to see. Because we all create everything around us. And here's the big bubble burst. Whatever we're doing today, whatever we've created in our life, I mean, we are the main creators. So can you actually really look at anything else and say it's a separate entity? You can't. But still, there's all these things going on, and I don't feel responsible for the skies still being sprayed. I don't feel I created that. I think that I'm kind of fighting against that. So it does get very convoluted. It gets confusing. It gets messy. And sometimes you just have to pull yourself back in.
There's a belief out there, hypothesis that says, and actually I think Rod Sterling did
Mhm.
a show on the Twilight that in reality we're all gods
Yeah.
Yeah.
and we're wearing the mask. And when we say we wear the mask, this is the mask.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
I'll share something with you very intimately. One of the things I have found about being in love was that even in the moments of deep intimacy, and I know this may sound strange, but there is this part of me who says I can never actually touch that which is, the soul, my soulmate. We each have this private, I don't know what it is, maybe it is us, that no one can actually, you can bruise it, but you can't really touch it. I don't know if you can possess it. Maybe I'm not speaking well on this, but it was the fact that there was this uniqueness.
There's
Gods would be like that, wouldn't they?
Well, I think what you're touching on there too is like, why do we come here? We
Yeah.
come, we come here for the food. We come here to make love. We come here for the more intense experience. We wear these garments, and again, in some ways, we are the fallen angels falling through the densities to take on a heavier, more tangible experience that is slower and more intense. And it's on purpose because, again, who made us? Ultimately, we make us, because we're residing up in the higher densities. We are multidimensional. A portion of us is becoming embodied to have this experience, go through all the intensities of what's not our normal state of experience, which is more of a blissful state of very disembodied than comparison to this. So what we have here is an intensity that we can't get, a wide range, very intense, and also slow. So
So who
experience.
created that?
Well, ultimately, we do here. We create this from the higher densities down into here. I do think there was sort of that programmer that created this matrix, the real creator of this
You see,
particular.
that's where I was driving at. Yeah, it's like, who
Yeah,
is that? Who? It blows my mind because, I always like my mind blown because you get to pick up the pieces later. But anyway, I always like, and I'm thinking, where's your head, man? Where do you have to be at to say, I'm going to create an earth and the trillions of complexities of matter and energy and substance all working together, and somehow that this is a grand design, and that the chaos is really, you can't see it, but it's really defined order. I mean, that's where sometimes I touch that ethereal at times, but
yeah.
you know,
Peter Meteor says, so we came here to enjoy, but then restrict the enjoyment. It's the intensity of the experience. So it's just like anything. If we have to work so hard to get to the weekend when we're in that 9 to 5, or if it's longer. I mean, for me, it was like 7 a.m. till about 6:30, 7 o'clock p.m. for 6 days a week for 10 years, in the corporate world, and this one job that still haunts me in my nightmares. Yeah, at the same time, the enjoyment of being off is so intensified because it's rare. And when you're off, then you're really, really soaking it in. It's that thing. Like, if we are, look at millionaires, and millionaires maybe not the right phrase. You need billionaires in this world now with deflation. How happy are they? They get bored. They could buy anything they want. So it doesn't give them the same sort
the
of,
few that I know are miserable.
they're miserable. It's because it's in us to want to strive for something. It's in us, and that's what this is. This existence is striving and testing. We're testing ourselves in more ways than one.
I heard the testimony of a dead man. Well, he was dying. I was right next to him when I lived in Knoxville. Multi millionaire. And it's weird because within 6 months, both him and his wife had terminal cancer. And he's dying. He's talking. I was very much into NASCAR at the time, working with Richard Petty and others, and he was really excited about that. And he looked at me and he said, Wayne, he says, I'm going to tell you something. He said, I'd give all of my wealth, he said, if I had just 10 minutes of clarity of thought. And 6 hours later, we carried them out on a stretcher. But yeah,
Mhm.
Absolutely. It's like you have to really work for something to make it
Mhm.
worthwhile,
yeah.
just
And
and
the pleasure part, I mean, I designed a software system, and to me, it was in the ecstasy of orgasm, putting out this system that I saw where the hell it came from. Um, and it was exhausting, but I loved it. I wanted
Mhm.
some more of it.
Well, I think you can see some of that in people's charts. When you look at them, you can see their purpose for coming here. And some people, it
What did
is
mine show you, Cindy?
the tangible. What did yours show you? Mine, I mean, your chart showed me that you have a purpose of pulling people together. So, in a way, you came down here for a very tangible experience to grab this person, this person, this person, and this person, and help help the rest of us move up. And someone in the chat asked, well, why don't we fix it? We're here. It's a mess. Why don't we just try to fix it? And that's part of your purpose, Wayne, is to pull people together and do shows like this so that we can get together and co-create a world that we want. What's so beautiful is once
Yeah,
we think it
beautiful.
in here, it can go out there. Thoughts are things, and that's the first thing I learned. And energy is what you think is going to go out there, and it's going to create a thing. It's going to create something tangible. So we have to be so careful with our thoughts, and that is something. If the controllers can control our thoughts, they get to control the destiny. So it's up to us to hold on to our sovereignty or find our sovereignty and utilize it for our experience. This is our experience. To me, it got hijacked to a high degree, but it's up to us. It's like, how far do we want them to take our power away from us? It's up to us.
Boy, Cindy, you were talking. I mean, there was a time when I couldn't stop the noise, it was this cacophony, but I find myself these days in much more quiet solitude, and it's kind of cool.
Mhm.
absolutely. I was looking at another comment that was talking about this as being a loose realm. It is a loose realm, but it's only a loose realm in to the degree that we allow it to
We allow it
control
to
us.
control us.
So I mean,
And who's feeding on whom?
yeah,
Oh my gosh, it's like a piggyback ride out there.
I
It
mean,
really is.
if you feed into the misery, then yeah, you are being part of the farm. If you're putting off, the frequency of love and compassion, then they can't suck anything beneficial from you. So it's like a tick jumping on you and jumping right off, saying, "No, don't want any of this." So again, it's up to us to raise our frequency. If that's all we see, then we are becoming a loose magnet. So it's up to the individual to raise the frequency up. At the same time, it's good to know what's going on, because if you're totally disconnected, you might not see things coming, and again, you could be knocked for a loop in that sense. But that's having that we would call Buddhist detachment, where you know what's going on, but you don't allow your energy and your overall
Essence.
essence and levity. You maintain yourself above the fray, so to speak, even though you acknowledge that this is happening. And there's some things that can really rile me up, and it's like I got to just kind of walk away from those things, or just put out a good intention that the situation will be overcome, instead of feeding into it. Because when we get into the hatred and everything, that's again pulling us down.
Mhm.
wow, I'm just sitting here going, and it is true for myself, that walk, God, I have such favor on my life because I've had the ability to experience this and come out relatively all right in the other end. But so I always found that it was religion for me, politics, and then corporate position. And, you know, what a trip. It's both good and bad, but those three particularly, when I walked away from them, was the great disconnect because it used to rile me up all the time. I mean, I was in a constant um, conundrum. It's this belief against that belief, this political position, or you have someone within the company that's doing this and that, and in the end, it was really all about control.
Hmm.
So if we learn to buck the control, we ask who is controlling the controllers. Is that a direct that, because our conversations could be considered heresy in another time.
Hmm.
You're questioning authority. You don't do that.
Hmm.
I
Mike was just talking about that
yeah,
earlier, about
See,
AI coming in, you know.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
no, absolutely. I think what you witnessed with the conquest of the church, for instance, the church was dominant. Now, it's interesting when you look at Rome, the Roman Empire, how long did it really last? Did it ever stop?
did it ever go away?
Yeah, and ultimately, I do think that Roman Empire is kind of a Sumerian empire, Rome,
Well,
Greece.
Rome was a republic, right?
Well, yeah, and then
And
a dictatorship. And,
yeah, I mean,
there are some parallels you could see with 45, 47, perhaps becoming, and then, who knows if it'll be Baron, down. I could see Baron as the next, Caesar Augustus, Octavian. He has Octavian's type of energy.
Well, he
boy,
You know,
doesn't he though?
looks
he
like.
actually looks like him too. The guides had said, it was curious because they never gave me an answer, but I asked if 45, 47 was one of the great leaders of the past, and they said to look at his profile and you'll know. And so I started looking at coins and stuff, and I don't know. I haven't gotten it, but I think he is somebody from the past. I mean, his side profile maybe looks the most like Pompey, and Pompey didn't really end up too well. And but at the same time, I do feel that, yeah, I think Baron might be Octavian reincarnated. And what was his destiny? He was the longest reigning, most powerful Caesar, really, when you get
Yeah.
to it. Um, and then the other thing, this is something, there's like another video that I've been thinking about making, because when I saw Melania dressed all in black for, I forget whose funeral it was, the widow's son kept coming through my head. The phrase, the widow's son, the widow's son. And I think it's from the guides, Melania being a widow, and the son, I think, is Baron, because I think ultimately Baron's supposed to, go past his father.
And
Um,
yeah.
so anyway, I'm going off on a total divergent, but when you talk about who's controlling the controllers and who are these gods, I think the thing is there's more than one group. Yeah, there's more than one group. And, when we get that Deuteronomy 32, Psalm 82, is it? And, the Song of Moses and the splitting up, which is the same thing that Plato talks about in Critias. The earth is divided up into tribes, and each one takes their own tribe, heavenly being. Well, what if it's not really like, just Enlil, Enki, Marduk, Ninhursag, Ningashita? What if we're thinking totally too small? What if it's literally even different stars, individual planets that are claiming their own tribe, or some sort of subset? What if it's more of a United Nations type thing? When we think again to the way the European conquest, which was again given a blessing by the religious structure, coming from Rome and the Catholic Church, ultimately Church of England, Anglican Church breaks off, and then you have the Protestants, and that whole thing. But I'm starting to really go off into tangents there. But what if that is really what it's more like, in that there's all these different subsets of ETs that are literally, they have the earth divided up into the tribes, and some of them are a little bit nicer to us and some of them are much nastier, but they're all they're all playing chess with us, against each other. We're the chess pieces.
Yeah.
As you were talking, like my mind was playing back the tape. So us as a species, different races, all right? And that's established. We're unique in that aspect. And as you were talking, so what was the purpose of Yahweh? Well, the thing that he told Abraham was that he had to have his mark on him and that he would separate those as his own separate race.
Mhm.
All right. So this is a different God now in play here, because if that was the case, then why didn't God do that back in Genesis 2? Why didn't God do that back in Genesis 1:26? Which is very evident now that, if you look at this with open eyes, you can see that there is layer, office upon office. And at some point, I'm trying to see, well, who is the chairman of the board here?
Well, again, Yahweh was a minor deity,
He was, absolutely.
very minor tribal deity. And
Baal kicked his ass.
yeah, that's part of the thing that kind of gets swept over. The Kunjalit inscriptions, that show Yahweh with his consort Asherah, and that there was a counterpart to Yahweh again, and that's again we've talked a lot about the divine feminine getting washed under the table, but even with these groups that are very warlike and they're definitely patriarchal societies, absolutely,
Well, you're
again.
going to tell me that Gabriel isn't warlike?
Oh,
You see
well,
that dude? It's over, Jack. I mean,
it's, I think too, that they take over. We've talked about that before. I think they hijack. They
good
hijack
word.
different beings, like Michael. Again, Michael the archangel. I think they hijack things. Like before, you were talking about the different parts in the Bible that might contradict themselves, and I know all about the Elohist texts compared to the Yahwist texts, and then we have that priestly writings too. So when we look at that, like what we have gotten with El is a very different energy from Yahweh. Couldn't be any different. El is natural, and when she tries to view El, she actually literally gets a cloud. She gets a consciousness in a cloud. And then you think about is it the Michelangelo or Da Vinci? That famous, with the hand going out to man from God in the cloud.
Michelangelo, isn't it?
Yeah. So, what they're touching on there is the natural order, the natural programming, and more nature-based entities, consciousnesses, as opposed to, Yahweh, very much, an invader, a cosmic pirate, a marauder.
A usurper.
Exactly. He's very much like a galactic Christopher Columbus, slave trader, murderer. It goes on and on.
Didn't they make him a saint?
They did.
And Lilith always, when I was doing the writing on the Liber Lilith, it was interesting because when she was talking, she said that was the problem. It was that particularly the divided serpent, which is Yahweh, I think representative of Yahweh, that he hid himself in a cloud.
Ah, interesting.
Well, when you look at the burning bush, it sounds more like a jinn.
Doesn't it, though?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Or one could say that they were merely using teleporting technology that just gave the impression that the bush was on fire, but it was just actually a way of advanced communication. I don't know.
Did you ever see the one we got from Mississippi where that entity killed a herd of goats?
Yes, killed like 10.
No.
Oh yeah. We have a photo and video of a gin.
It's a djinn. It's this fire being. It's absolutely wild. We didn't see it while we were filming it, but one of our family members,
Yeah, said, do you
after,
realize what you
he's
caught?
like, you realize what's on this video.
And so we went back through it, and yeah,
They
I mean,
tried to blame his dog. The police came to our RV and they said, you know, where was your dog at this time? And I mean, Zeke is a very peaceful guy, but the 10 goats were slaughtered.
yeah, Zeke was
Slaughtered.
a 60-pound pit bull mix that was 10 years, 12 years old at the time. And, you know, whatever it was, slaughtered a whole herd of goats right across from us.
And when you look at the camera,
while we were making the video.
Yeah, while we're making the video, the goats saw it and then they ran off to the left and then they were just gone. And it was about an hour later, the police come knocking on our door saying, where was your dog at this time? And
yeah, I mean, we were in an RV park, you know,
we
so
have that video.
we had been
up.
camping, and that was when
Send it to you.
we got
Yeah, I'd like to see that.
we had an
it
encounter
was
with
horrible.
a triangle then. So we were talking about that, how a triangle was following us for several miles on a backcountry road right next to a military base. And they literally irradiated us then. And Zeke ended up dying of cancer. And Sassy had growths on her, and then Cindy got leukemia, you know, so you know, we overcame it naturally, but it almost killed both of us, honestly. And I do think they thought they killed us at that point.
I think if we hadn't have known how to overcome it naturally, that, you know, it would have been a different story. But that's when I got all into the medical grade ozone and started talking to some Western doctors that, you know a thing or two about natural healing. And we got through it. And anybody else, I don't know, it was pretty crazy. But, you know, being activated and being able to activate other people, you can be problematic to the system because you can help people see past the veil. And it just takes a minute, you know, for people to see past the mass media and realize that there's another underlying story going on here. And as soon as that awakening happens, as soon as that wave of energy hits that person, they're no longer controlled. They're no longer very useful for the controllers. So
yeah, you know, Deborah was asking, did you overcome? Yeah, because we didn't go into the system. So
yeah, I did. I did
know,
100%. I would say I'm back to 100%. It took about 3.5 years of medical grade ozone therapy and some other things, but here I am, stronger than ever.
And y'all look beautiful. I just have to say, you have a glow about you. So, you know,
Thank
you know, and it's disturbing to think that that a controlling system would find, because I mean, y'all don't move amongst the political movers and shakers, the corporate, you know, elite. You're beautiful people. You have a deep knowledge, and to me, it's when I meet with y'all, it's like I'm on. You ever been in the airports where you've had those people movers,
yeah,
and you know, hey, those it has that speed. Well, a trick, you know, because I was on the 200,000 mile club each year, that if you start walking faster on those, it like amplifies your speed. So, you know, that's
Yeah.
what I feel like when I'm with y'all. It's like, this is fun. And people are trying to catch up, you know, they're riding but we're like way out. So that's what it's like.
Yeah.
We feel the same way. It's always a blast, you know, and it's fascinating to again share our experiences because you've had a wealth of yours, and like
Yeah.
that photo that you shared of the beings, you know, over the house when you were, that's huge too. I mean, it's when people realize you have these experiences on a regular basis, your reality is not going to be the normal reality because I mean you have a knowing experiential. So when we go into Christianity and we say, well, we're the Gnostics more truly along the lines of the original intention, you know,
Yeah.
or was it the Essenes? You know, again, any way you look at it, I feel that the Gnostics and the Essenes, they were holding a certain light, and they didn't allow the system the opportunity to manipulate like what they ended up coming up with Constantine and all that.
It's interesting you're talking, and I know this is kind of going off in the tangent, but I'm still driving the bus. Everything's cool. You know, we got three recliners right up here, and each one of us can take controls of, but um, I was talking to Lynn about this, and I said, hon, my half century in Christianity, and then particularly quarter century involved with, the biggest televangelists, these multi-million dollar organizations. And I told her, I said, see, I thought I was into the prosperity message, honoring God by being prosperous, because why would you want to worship a broke God? If your God can't supply your needs, then why are you bending knee? So, and I was with the Word of Faith people, and it's now considered almost cultish, um, and as I look back, some of and I've said this before, the most powerful wizard I've ever known and met was Kenneth Copeland. And I met some powerful witches. I mean, if you want to say, and people may get a little offended, but it's true in my perspective, like with Joyce Myers and others. These are powerful mind manipulators, and they're connected to something. It's freaking tangible. You get around them. And as I now sit on this side of the court, it's still that burning within me. Then who is it? Who and what is masterfully either manipulating or orchestrating all of this that I've been taught is so-called reality? I'll be 70 years old next month. I don't think I can define reality in a sense that, it would hold up, to reality.
Think about it. Yesterday was the 45th anniversary of The Empire Strikes Back first coming out.
Yeah,
Think about all the symbolism in there. So, like what you're saying is, who really is the Dark Lord of the Sith that's manipulating all these strings?
yeah, who is that guy? What was his name? Who was the
Darth Sidious? Yeah, Palpatine.
Palpatine, thank
I
you.
don't think it's any mistake that he looks just like Soros. I
No.
really don't,
And it does kind of look like a couple of the popes.
And then 45, the number 45 you brought up is 45.
Yeah, 45. So it's 45 years ago. And of course, Trump was 45. He's 47 now. 4 plus 5 is 9. 4 plus 7 is 11. So there's a 9/11 reference there. The numerology, how about, the last president, the whole Barron Trump thing, I have all those books too. I read them all. So, years back, read them all and did a few videos on it. So, is Trump a time traveler, or are there time travelers behind all this? Is this, all the Mandela effects that are constantly happening? I do think we can play with space-time. I do think we can manipulate not just what's going to be in the future, but what was in the past. And maybe by their rewriting history, they're trying their best to, again, change the past to bring about an outcome that they want.
And then I think about what you mentioned about the nine in what is it, July? Is it July 4th? Is this the convergence of what we're seeing, the same thing that was
July, with the planetary alignments, the
Holy
peak.
crap,
If we look at planetary alignments on a bell curve, because things are not going to happen the exact day, but if you look at it in a bell curve, when these alignments come together, July 4th is the peak of that bell curve.
Yeah. And so I'm thinking, what would be easier, trying to manipulate and herd, billions of people? But what if there was an event that happened where there suddenly wasn't a billion people?
I kind of
The Georgia Guidestones still come back to haunt me in my thoughts, let there be no more than 500 million.
Yeah. What really bothers me about that is that I get this thing going in my head, this Bible quote, to let the dead bury the dead. So,
I've heard that myself.
and it just goes, and I'm like, what exactly does that mean? And to me, I started to believe, well, if they're going to have a mass die off, I don't think they like, this is the ugly part of it. I don't think they like to get their hands dirty. I think they would rather have other humans bury other humans for a very long time, and then they knock the rest out when it's convenient for them. And that's why it is so very important that we work on our healing, and we work on our bodies, we work on our temples, we do all the things, so that we're not going to be a part of that mass annihilation if that's what's going to happen. They don't like to clean up big messes.
No, there's so much going on. The mass migrations, that goes all the way back to Acadia and Sumer, and it was used as a war tactic. It keeps things jumbled up. How many people really are on the planet? I bet you it's less than 8 billion. I don't think we're at that many people.
How do they count that?
Well, it doesn't make sense because people have gone ahead and counted in different countries like China, adding up, the biggest cities and stuff. And then it comes back showing that if those cities' populations are correct, there must be a much larger population out in the rural areas. But they've been herding them into the cities forever and pushing them away from the rural areas. So a lot of people now are saying China only has 300 or 400 million people. They don't have 1.4 billion. And, again, I really wonder, I mean, in your area, wherever you are living, especially if you've lived there all your lives, you can't say, do you remember in the past, it seemed like there was more people around you. But if you are, again, somebody that's moved like me, I've lived in 10 states and I don't know how many cities. I've moved over 40 times, so it's hard for me to judge that because each time lately it's been to a more remote position, out of staying away from the frequencies and the towers and all that. So we can't tolerate the energy in the cities anymore. So when we pass through a big metropolitan area, it's like we move as fast as we can to get through there.
And then you could bring up that point, living out in Colorado, if you go out west, there's a lot of open land. And when
Yep.
we moved east, you know, Kansas is about as bare as you can get. I mean, and I'm thinking, so they keep talking about overpopulation. And I'm going, where?
Right.
I,
I don't
I,
see it.
yeah.
I really don't see it. I've seen somebody do it where you could fit everybody into Texas, and I forget how many acres they could have. Like each person could have 5 acres or something like that, and it would fit the entire 8 billion. But I really don't think there's 8 billion. I think that there's a lot less than that. That's my gut.
And the thing with migration as well, I mean, there's the other side of the thought that, well, they've got us in the Western world with birth certificates. Okay, all right, I can dig that. But come on, does every nation do that? Is there a central collecting point where send me those birth certificates? Is there some computer that, again, I'm like you, I'm highly suspicious. How do I know that, there's 8 billion people?
Mm-hmm.
Have you seen the videos, Wayne, of India and the cities back in the 18 like 50s, 60s, 70s? These cities were huge and built up, but there's not many people. And we see the same thing time and time again with these old films that now they're digitalizing the films and they're putting color in. When you look at it, where is everybody? It doesn't look hustle and bustle compared to what you would think is the case. But the cities are big and built up. Why would you have them so big if you didn't have people to house them? Unless people were there and then they're not there anymore.
What's up with the ones without bathrooms?
Yeah, that too.
Yeah, I mean, I've got a whole shelf filled and specifically with that. I got pictures in San Francisco. There ain't nobody there.
Right.
It's like, I think there's just a number of other cities in Europe as well that the same phenomenon.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean,
Mhm.
I'll take St. Louis as an example. You know, if you're telling me that people have migrated west, okay, all right, that may be true, but there is a lot of empty city.
Oh, yeah. We were all over
And
the Southwest.
where'd they go?
Yeah. I mean, we've been all over the Southwest with our RV.
Yeah, y'all have.
And when you look at, we could speak for anyway, Nevada, Arizona, and New Mexico, and a lot of Texas too. There's very few populated areas when you really look at it. And there's so much space in between. I mean, where we were living, we were in a town of about 900 people, and our trip to the supermarket was 75 or 90 miles.
We could do either 75 or 90, depending on what you needed. So
Yeah, but that's how
Oh,
far it was each way. So we would do one big trip every 2 weeks, and we would have to pack it with ice.
like 6 hours round trip.
Yeah, to go shopping. But there were no major towns really between that and the shopping area. And then when you go to the north, it's the same thing. You go to the west, the same thing. Go to the east, it was Nellis Air Force Base. So there's a lot of area with nobody.
And it looks like Mars. I mean, not a tree. The one thing that the desert did teach me, it taught me to find beauty in everything. It was hard
yeah,
because
yeah.
I went from northern Idaho where it's rocky and pine trees and beautiful and lakes and the Snake River and all of that to this little teeny tiny town right next to Death Valley, California. But we were right on the other side of the border in Nevada. Talk about moving to Mars. I mean, there's nothing that everything is bald. So I did. I learned how to appreciate. What are you going to do? You can't sit there and be angry for 20 years. So I,
Shake
I
your
learned how to.
shake your fist to the sky,
Yeah, well, you
How
could,
dare you, God?
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like Patricia here in chat says she saw our Poverty Point video. She's from New
Patrick.
Orleans. Oh, Patrick. And he's from New Orleans. He hasn't gone to Poverty Point, so that's like 4 hours north of where he's at, 4 or 5 hours. And you think about that. What's in between those two areas? There's a few small towns, here and there, but there's a lot of nothing. There's an awful lot of nothing all around us all the time. Um,
You're a
yeah.
unique state too. I had a client, Oceaneering. They had their manufacturing was down in Morgan City. So I flew into New Orleans and drove to Morgan City. Holy shit. I mean, if you really wanted to knock somebody off, I mean, there is freaking miles of nothing but swamp on both
Right?
sides of the road. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it's the only a true story on this. So I get into Morgan City staying at the Holiday Inn, right? And it's freaking raining like straight down, just in sheets of it. So I get in, check in, and have to get in over into the room. And so when I open the door, and seriously, the toilet was like shooting water up like 4 feet in the air
My God.
because everything's submerged out there. Anyway, uh,
Wow.
And lots of hungry gators too.
it's true. It's freaking true. That's, when I was driving, it's like, just you don't want to break down.
No, no.
Just telling you. But interesting state, and it is very it's diverse. It definitely is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It
Well,
ain't the West, that's for sure.
yeah, it is an interesting area. But when you think about it, the Georgia Guidestone's talking about 500 million people. What if we're already closer to that? I mean, I really doubt the population size that they give us. That's, I guess, the bottom line. I really doubt it. Maybe it's 2 billion. Who knows? I don't think it's as big as they say, because they always deceive us in one way or another. Up is down, down is up. That's the way the system works.
Isn't there a certain quantum theory that says that reality is merely what we see right before us right now. That I know that there's a wall behind me, and I know what that wall is with the outside. But in reality, it doesn't actually exist other than just what my brain will construct as to what would be the memory.
Mhm.
Because there is this thought that in reality, it's a very infinite defined space.
Hmm.
Absolutely. Have you read the Yoga Sutras?
I have not.
Oh, well, it'll blow your mind because,
I like that. I've taken a lot of acid that tried to do that. Didn't work, but
it's all in the Yoga Sutras. They're written in such a way, you got to find a good translation. You just meditate on them. It's like the Tao Te Ching, where you just basically read one stanza. That's it for the day. Soak it in, ponder it, meditate on
I
it.
have to get it.
But really, when you look at it, it's as if all our quantum physicists have read the Yoga Sutras and now they're putting them into language of modern 21st century science because it's all
So
right
how
there.
would that line up? It seemed like they would line up very nicely.
Oh, yeah, no, exactly. The universe is mind stuff. The universe is consciousness. Everything is an illusion. It's a hologram. And
The first principle, the universe is mental.
yeah. Oh, yeah. So, the Hermetic principles
Yeah.
coincide perfectly. I think the Hermetic principles are a little bit easier for Western minds to grasp, but
I taught a whole series on that. It was it was good. It was refreshing.
oh, yeah, it's wonderful. And it's accurate, I believe.
I have found it to be. I mean, it's changed me. I mean, because if you realize that all paradoxes are can have a solution, I love that. That gives me infinite potential of possibilities.
Yeah.
Sanatana Dharma. Sanatana Dharma.
Mhm.
That's one thing that I got when I was kind of in trance is if you had to take a religion or a belief system and have one that really encompasses what we are doing, look into the Sanatana Dharma is what our guides told us.
Yep.
So
And that literally means eternal truth, eternal way. But it is, and it's in alignment with, again, the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. If you've ever studied Kashmiri Shaivism, along the same lines again, it's all mind. It's really all mind and consciousness. So this is where we get back to the fact that we are eternal consciousness having a temporary, intense human experience. But that is our normal state of being, is disembodiment. So, this is just temporary. It's quite a little ride there, roller coaster ride at times.
and when you speak to spirituality or religion, it seems like we're always trying to get out of the body and look over here and look over there, but I don't know, one could also argue that it wouldn't the ultimate spirituality be to immerse yourself in your body and in this area where you have everything so tangible, because this is the unusual experience. So.
And yeah, coming from your background too, just to bring up one more thing, because there's always so much to talk to you about. Brahma and Sarasvati. Brahma is thought to be the creator god. Sarasvati is his wife, goddess of wisdom, also of music too. And then we have Abraham and Sarai, right? And Sarah,
Correct.
and so you can see where that came from it. And when you look to Shiva, again, Shiva is thought to be the destroyer. Also, it's consciousness before embodiment. But you also have the Jewish, process of grieving called sitting Shiva, literally. So
Yes.
you see there's that taken it from it too. Some believe that when you look to Judaism, it was started by some Brahmins that had broken away and started their own thing. And Brahmins are the priestly caste in Hinduism. So there are those scholars that believe that Judaism and the beginning of the whole Abrahamic tradition broke away from a group of Brahmins, breaking away from tradition and starting this path.
We can get into a whole nother discussion on that because it's always the one that's always challenged me was in you look at the Hebrews, which no longer exist. But I could never figure out how you could have, 12 brothers that went down into Egypt, and for 490 years they lived in Egypt, how they were not more Egyptian than they were Hebrew.
Right.
Hmm.
I mean, yeah.
And it's like,
Look at how people come here, and one
yeah,
generation, 2 generations, I'm American. Yeah, right.
yeah. I mean, they're going to be more Hebrew, I mean, Egyptian, and they're so we'll have maybe we'll bring that up next week.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I can't
sounds
believe
good.
that we've been sorry, folks. I did. If anyone's still with us, that I appreciate that because I was lost in the conversation.
Yeah.
Deep stuff, and I've got notes here that for instance, real quick, like there's the thing when I was in broadcasting, the phenomenon known as the 4 a.m. news cycle. And it's like there is a reset in the world at 4 a.m. East Coast time, particularly, it seems, and that is when the script is sent out as to what is going to be the story and the key words for the day.
Hmm.
Wow.
I don't know
Interesting.
if you knew that, but that's
No,
how it
Nope.
works. Yep,
Nope. That's
yep,
that
good stuff.
reminds me of Orwell's 1984.
yeah, yeah. And by the way, in the Nuremberg painting, there was also the pox on humans. Remember, they
Yeah.
had the people that were sick, so
Yeah.
we got to, all right, I got notes for next week. And then Cindy,
Okay.
you're going to talk to when, we had a particular, was our question, what was the question that we had for, well, we didn't meet last week. So
We didn't
it's,
meet last week, but if you have a question, I will do a Prashna chart. And what a Prashna chart is the moment the astrologer gets the question, she casts the chart at that moment, and that's going to give us our answer.
all right. You know where the contact is.
Yes.
Yes. Make sure to like it. Make sure to go over there and subscribe, and support these beautiful people. This is,
And thank
sow
you.
some good karma.
Thank you. Thank you. Everybody has been so wonderful coming over to say hi, and,
It's
just
just
Yeah.
great.
it's one
It's
big
been great.
family now. That's beautiful.
Yep.
Yeah, it is kind of doing this merging and coalescing thing. I
Hmm.
see I see I see this beautiful blue green mixing in with this emerald, yeah, delightful.
Very nice.
All
Uh,
right, y'all have a great Memorial Day. And next Thursday, y'all want to get
Sounds
together
great.
again?
Yep.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Okay, I love this. This is good. Thank you all in the chat room. I didn't really get a chance to look at it all, but I go back and read it. Was it good? I wasn't paying
I think it
attention.
was
Yep.
very, very, very good in the
It
chat room.
seemed very good.
Mhm.
Yep. And then you inspired us so that we started this week doing an 8 a.m. thing. So we'll probably do 8 a.m. lives besides Thursday. Thursday, we'll focus
Excellent.
on this one.
Mhm.
So you're bringing us out to the people, Wayne. It was you
Thank
that
you.
inspired us.
Thank you, Wayne.
All I got to say is that y'all are marvelous. You're just marvelous. And people, I tell you, they respond to it. It's a good energy. And that's what makes having um, building relationships is that when and it's so easy, it's like you're sitting down in the recliner and you're having coffee and you're just, we're all looking at each, it's just very comfortable. So I love y'all, appreciate it. And to speak favor over you and folks again, just give them love. And the best way you can do that is be guided by what you feel inside. So, and as they say, if you will learn to doubt your doubts, you'll never doubt your doubts again. There we go.
Nice.
All right. All right, everybody.